Hello and welcome to Hong Kong Lit Club, the monthly show for written word enthusiasts hoping to embark on a literary journey through Hong Kong. In this podcast, we will explore what happens when we look beyond Hong Kong as an Asian financial hub and a so-called cultural desert. My name is Julia and I will be your host. I'm a librarian by trade, a Hong Konger at heart, and someone who believes in the power of words to tell the story of a city. Without further ado, let's dive in. Who are the writers of Hong Kong, and what do they have to say? Welcome to the third episode of Hong Kong Lit Club, where we dive into the work and world of Hong Kong writer Wong Yi, also known as Eva Wong, a versatile literary voice capturing the heartbeat of her city. A graduate of the University of Hong Kong and King's College London, Wong Yi has made her mark as an award-winning author, librettist, and cultural commentator. Named one of the 20 most anticipated young Sinophone novelists by Taiwan's Unitas magazine, her writing weaves together Hong Kong's everyday life, history, and collective memory with striking emotional depth. She is the author of 4 short story collections, including her most recent, the acclaimed Ways to Love in a Crowded City, published in 2021. Wong Yi has also led numerous cross-disciplinary collaborations in opera, dance, and multimedia performances, showing that her work transcends traditional boundaries. She's also a passionate educator, teaching creative writing and hosting RTHK's book review program, while contributing to major publications like Ming Pao and Fleur des Lettres. In today's episode, we will focus on her short story, Overseas Bride, originally written in Chinese and translated into English by Jennifer Feely. You can read the story online on Cha, the Asian literary journal. There, you will also find an essay titled Mother Tongue Overseas, where Wong Yi unpicks the ways in which the story has resonated with many readers internationally. You can find links to both texts in the description box of this episode. So, what is today's story about? Overseas Bride explores the emotional toll of emigration, set against a Hong Kong-like exodus. The narrator wrestles with a partner's marriage for escape proposal, confronting the sacrifices of leaving home, lost language, identity, and belonging. Through vivid Cantonese idioms and aching introspection, the story frames migration not as a fresh start, but as a fractured emotional journey. We will begin the episode by listening to Wong Yi read an excerpt from Overseas Bride in the original Chinese. She will be reading in Cantonese for about 2 minutes, and then carrying on with the whole story in English. I was fortunate enough to interview the author herself and enjoy the most inspiring conversation with her. You will hear this interview right after she has read her story, Overseas Bride. Now sit back and relax. It is story time. This is Overseas Bride by Wong Yi in Cantonese and English.
過埠新娘黃怡，這裏也許有繁殖環境受到嚴格管制的本地豬肉，但繁殖這些豬的人不會知道為什麼世上會有人要跪地棄豬乸，什麼是豬籠入水，什麼叫食咗人隻豬，什麼叫男人靠得住豬乸都會上樹。這裏沒有你的舊同學。在畢業多年後，半取笑半恭維地說：你的工作一定使你發過豬頭。這裏也沒有你的眾多親戚，在農曆新年的聚餐上吹噓自己從豉油撈飯的年代拼搏到魚翅撈飯的年代，見過城裏許多的大風大浪，最終收成眾多的資產與虛榮。我知道你會想念的，這些誇大與低俗。那些原本使你厭倦的血緣責任與俾面派對， 當你再也無法和親友頻繁會面至厭倦的地步，有啲寂寞，只有我和這邊不正宗、不地道的仿造品可以排解。但是足夠嗎？這邊這些絕對不比任何兒女優勝的叉燒。明明不吃狗，卻在學校常被人說只要一笑就會很像烚熟狗頭的我。如果我不足以取代你的全世界，你在這邊找到的戀人，會明白你已重新學習的語言說出的情話嗎？會明白使你學會何謂愛情的地方，對你來說有多重要嗎？
Now let's listen to the whole story read in English, also by Wong Yi herself.
Overseas Bride by Wong Yi, translated by Jennifer Feely. The night everyone in the entire city was scrambling for ways to emigrate, you said you might as well marry me, become an overseas bride, and flee the city in which you live. I smiled my usual smile, gently changing the subject. My dearest, how can I say no to you? But there's no way I can say yes to you. It's not that I don't want to make you my wife in name in front of everyone, or be unable to marry anyone else during the many years of our marriage, or that I'm unwilling to bear the title of divorcee after helping you obtain residency here. Witnessing you and the person with whom you really want to grow old eventually marching into wedded bliss. Or, during the never-ending period of applying for residency, should you choose to spend the rest of your life side by side with me, that would also be wonderful. I'd love you like an ancient tree, like a cool stream beneath the sun, like a quiet, slow breeze, like the past, like the present. As long as you come here, I'll fling open my arms in my home, in this other city, welcoming all of your possessions and scars, every part of you. I'm willing to accept it all. It's just, I'm not really sure. If you come here, can you truly be happy? If you marry into my city, you'll have to leave your mother tongue. From here on out, living in a language acquired in school, via exams and inferiority complexes. You repeat your life story time and again in a second language. The other person might understand your reasons for leaving, or they might not. Here, it's not that there aren't any people who share our birthplace, but we're the minority of a minority. Even though there's a Chinatown, there are no gossip magazines penned in our mother tongue, no ads with slogans containing forced puns tailored to fit whatever product is being peddled, no long-winded, foul-mouthed taxi drivers, no recurring situation comedies playing out in tatanhangs, no boisterous, lazy-tongued secondary school students. Those oh-so-important, oh-so-cacophonous sounds. Even though we can walk down the streets here, holding hands without fear, openly discussing all sensitive subjects, we'll no longer be able to rub shoulders with those who understand the two completely different feelings of cold-blooded and blood-chilling. And the person sitting beside us on the subway won't know what kind of cake Johnny half-bakes, or who's reluctant to eat crow. Here, there may be local pork raised in a strictly regulated environment, but the people who raise these pigs won't know why there are people in the world willing to sweat like pigs to bring home the bacon. What is meant by filling up the piggy bank, the meaning of a chauvinist pig porking the bride on her wedding night, or the meaning of the phrase, when pigs fly, on men you can rely. Here, there are none of your former classmates half teasing, half complimenting you years after graduation that your job surely allows you to live high on the hog. Likewise, here, there are none of your multitudinous relatives boasting about their travails from rags to riches over Lunar New Year dinners, finally amassing various assets and accolades after weathering storm after storm in the city. I know you'll miss these things, these exaggerations and vulgarities, these family obligations and perfunctory social gatherings that you're sick of. When you can no longer see your family and friends often enough to grow tired of them, your loneliness can only be assuaged by me and the pale imitations here. But will it be enough? Here, the char siu pork is so tasteless that even the most good-for-nothing son or daughter is preferable. And people in school remark that I, who clearly doesn't eat pet birds, resemble the cat who ate the canary whenever I smile. If I'm not enough to replace your entire world, will the lover you find here be able to understand the terms of endearment you utter in a relearned language? Be able to understand the place that taught you what love is, and how important it is to you? I don't believe people from one city must marry people from the same city and give birth to the next pure blood generation. And what's more, if you don't come, you may not even be able to utter the sincerest terms of endearment as you'd like. I just can't bear to see you sink into the loneliness that your mother tongue means nothing to those around you, far away from so many people who share the same language, sentenced to a lifetime of exile. I thought that in the end, I'd be the one who'd cross the ocean to return to you, surrounded by people we grew up with, who speak the same language and listen to the same jokes, spouting off the same cliches that we've heard over and over. I'd laugh at you for continuing to bundle up like a steamed cake on top while baring your legs like grass jelly below, regardless of the weather, pairing a long-sleeved oversized sweater with a miniskirt. Year after year, we'd watch swimsuit-clad Miss Hong Kong contestants answer questions posed by veteran hosts and rudely nitpick the appearances of those women who dream of becoming stars. Each year, we could also line up to squeeze into book fairs and see ghost-written celebrity books sell like hotcakes. I'd listen to you lament once more that everyone says the city is a cultural desert, when obviously there are numerous outstanding authors and international award-winning poets, as well as stage plays deserving of more attention, whose ticket prices are much cheaper than foreign productions. And I'd agree, disappointed that you'd been let down. At least where you are, our mother tongue is alive, enabling us to be hypercritical, because there, our mother tongue is a matter of course, rather than a minority language that needs to be painstakingly preserved, encouraged to be used, and legally protected. Our mother tongue is the majority in the place where our mother tongue is produced, and we are the clear majority in the place where we were born. Then, if you really proposed marriage to me at that time, it wouldn't be because you wanted to escape, but because you wanted to stay and plant something, grow something. We could grow long-term and socially beneficial careers, offspring who love learning, and even art that moves others, enjoying our golden years with all the old people in the city. And between the two of us, we no longer need the city's trials and tribulations to make you consider staying with me. Many, many words bubble up on the tip of my tongue, then gently burst and dissipate before being spat out. My dearest, compared to the city where you live, the city where I currently reside may be a stone building that won't topple in the foreseeable future. But can the scenery here really make you happy? My dear, how on earth can I use the gentlest and most graceful words to tell you I predict that over here you'll encounter a tonguelessness that will starve you of oxygen? I find myself speechless. And so, please say something. Keep on speaking. Speak to your heart's content. Like artificial respiration, like blowing smoke rings, like a living person. Keep on speaking.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Wong Yi read her story Overseas Bride. Now, please stay with me as I chat to Wong Yi herself about the story's context and themes, language and identity, Hong Kong's cultural paradoxes, and the creative process and reception of this story. Thank you again to the Eaton Hotel for allowing me to use the recording booth to record this interview. Thank you so much for being here today, Eva.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So first of all, I'd like to ask you about the way that this story fits into your collection. If I'm right, this was published in a collection of stories called Ways to Love in a Crowded City.
Yes.
So I'd love to know a bit about what unique angle on love and relationships you wanted to explore and how those themes differ from your other stories.
Overseas Bride is one of my favorite stories to come out of this collection. When I first started conceptualizing this collection of short stories called Ways to Love in a Crowded City, I mainly wanted to explore the various kinds of constraints of living in this extremely crowded and very busy city that we're also used to. This is not normal. Like in the entire world, you would not find a city with such densely populated areas, but also with such a work ethic in the hearts of everyone that keeps the city going at top speed 24/7. So I was thinking about how to use love stories as an angle to present these very unique qualities of Hong Kong. And when I got to Overseas Bride, it was a moment in time when I saw that a lot of my friends were contemplating leaving the city for various reasons. Maybe they wanted to pursue a degree overseas, maybe they wanted to emigrate and find career options elsewhere, or just join family and friends somewhere else. And I found myself faced with a lot of questions from these people asking if I would also become one of them to leave the city. And I never have a good answer to it because I don't know what the future might hold. I love Hong Kong, but I also love exploring the world. But when I think about myself leaving Hong Kong for an extended period of time, I always feel this sense of anxiety and grief over having to leave behind Cantonese, which is my mother tongue and something that I've been working with as a language. In a lot of my other works, I've been working with a Cantonese language libretto for a chamber opera in Cantonese, which is extremely rare. I've been hosting shows on the radio in Cantonese, promoting books by local authors. So Cantonese is something that I live with and I work with a lot. So I thought about what would happen if this person in the story decides to leave. Would they actually be happy? They might be living in a place with a different social or political atmosphere, but the price they would have to pay is that they would have to leave behind Cantonese. And the concept of mother tongue is something that is quite complex. You can't actually see it, except when you see it written on a page. You cannot touch it, but it's something so real that everybody can understand. I wanted to make it feel even more real. I wanted to have that sort of loss of the mother tongue appear more immediate and thorough by imagining all these phrases in Cantonese that seem almost untranslatable. What would that mean to a person if a significant part of your language or your identity of your mother tongue is forced to be left behind? So it was an exploration of all these sort of anxieties and imaginations of perhaps maybe one day leaving the city or seeing my friends leave the city, and also treating it as a sort of love letter to this amazing language of Cantonese. And I'm really glad about the way it turned out. It connected with so many readers in Hong Kong and elsewhere. So it definitely is one of my favorite stories to come out of Ways to Love in a Crowded City.
Thank you for sharing. I think your love for the city is really palpable in the story. So that really came through strongly. And obviously your love for the language. I love that you decided to use all the expressions and colloquialisms to really illustrate that so vividly, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So if we come back to the love aspect of the story, The marriage proposal in the story is framed as a survival tactic rather than a romantic gesture. So I want to ask you, did you intentionally subvert traditional love story tropes with this setup? Because when it starts, we're sort of expecting a big romantic moment and maybe have a lot of more cliche conversations in mind, whereas what unfolds is actually something quite different. So how did you play around with that?
I think it's rather natural for me to imagine love as something that could have many different kinds of possibilities and relationships, not only having that Prince Charming coming in and they lived happily ever after. I feel like throughout history and in different nations, marriages have had different reasons for happening. Like there would be these stories about, kings and princes marrying because of their nations needing to be linked together for political power. We see these stories in the news about rich families getting married because they wanted to maintain a sort of social status. And we also hear stories of people getting married just to get away from their parents. So I feel like from a very young age, I have been aware that people get married for various reasons. And this idea of getting married for a visa to run away from a city, it's not new. It's even become a sort of joke that sometimes I hear. There was this moment during COVID, I don't know if this is your experience as well, where all these exes were coming out of the woodworks. Like I hear my friends telling me, hey, my ex texted me wanting to get back together. I'm like, this is just the COVID talking. Like, don't listen to them. People are just lonely. And in these moments, I would hear my friends saying, these exes are telling me that we could get married and go overseas. Or I know that you have a foreign passport. Let's just get married and get out of here. It could sound like a joke, but I know that in reality, these sort of things do happen. So when I was writing Ways to Love in a Crowded City, I didn't want to just portray love as something that is idealized and a very singular sort of mode of happening. I wanted to explore all of the different possibilities. What about a relationship that doesn't really have a lot of love in it, or perhaps a marriage that is built on something other than wanting to build a life together necessarily at this moment? Maybe it could just be an administrative reason for people to get married. That is also a valid reason to get married, I feel like sometimes. And what makes it sort of legitimate or makes it acceptable is the grander reason behind it. Like, what is so bad out there that makes you want to go into marriage, to run away from it? So I feel like this is an interesting sort of opportunity for me to explore that. What if it's not one of those fairy tale stories? What if it's just an administrative reason or a marriage out of fear? I'm sure that there are people out there who are doing that. Perhaps we could look deeper into it and really try to understand the reasons and the emotions behind that.
It's very refreshing to read a more pragmatic sort of take on love and marriage. And no, I was not aware of what was happening during COVID with all the exes coming back. I think that's hilarious. So do you think this story, Overseas Bride, is a distinctly Hong Kong story, or is it one with universal resonance?
I think when I started out writing the story, I wanted it to feel very Hong Kong. That's why I didn't shy away from throwing in all the cultural references that only Hong Kong people would know. Like, we would all have this Chinese parent telling their kids that, oh, you're such a bad child that I prefer having a stick of char siu pork instead of you. This is, I feel like, a very culturally specific insult, which is not a nice thing, but then we have all heard it. And I also put in a lot of the Cantonese or references to things like Miss Hong Kong. So I thought initially setting out that this would be something that the Hong Kong readers would embrace and perhaps people from outside of Hong Kong might struggle with understanding. But then I brought the story with me when I went to the University of Iowa to participate in the International Writing Program's fall residency. So I was there for about 3 months with 33 other writers from all around the world. And Overseas Bride turned out to be the story that connected with students and writers the most. Apparently, a lot of people with histories of migration or learning a second language really resonated with this idea of the mother tongue being so important and ingrained in them as part of their identities that leaving that was actually quite traumatic. I've had students come up to me asking for a hug after I read this story because they felt like someone expressed the sorrow that they had when they moved to America to pursue studies and that nobody could speak their mother tongue with them again in the way that they were used to when they were still back home. And I felt like this is something that is also quite universal. It's not just the culturally specific insults about pork or the jokes about you looking like a boiled dog's head when you smile. It's also about this universal experience of holding your mother tongue so near and dear to your heart that leaving it is actually unintentionally very traumatic. And I'm so glad that this story got to connect with them in that way.
Yeah, so you actually already touching on what I wanted to discuss next, which is wonderful. You're a mind reader, Eva. So I wanted to talk about the mother tongue as a sacrifice. So you've just mentioned that losing one's mother tongue can be very traumatic. And of course, it's at the center of immigration and any stories about immigration. So would you say that did you position this as more devastating than physical displacement?
I would say so because I personally have experience of living overseas for a period of time. So I did my master's degree in London. So of course they speak English over there. They have a Chinatown and they also speak Cantonese in the Chinatown, but I don't live in Chinatown. And I associate myself with mostly people who speak English because for some reason the other Hong Kong students didn't want to hang out with me. So I felt like there was this sense of loneliness that I didn't get to speak Cantonese with anyone. And I found myself craving that sort of interaction more than any other thing from the city. Like I know if I wanted a particular snack or a drink that is specific to Hong Kong, I could always go to Chinatown and get it, or I can order it online, or I can have a friend send it in to me from Hong Kong. But I cannot have my friends stuff themselves in a box and send them to me in London and just come in and just chat with me about the latest gossip in Hong Kong in Cantonese. That is something that is extremely difficult to get. You cannot buy that. I feel like in this age of capitalism, you can buy anything and get overnight shipping on whatever it is you want from anywhere in the world. But a language is something that is such a living being that it has to live in a person and in a community that is often tied to a specific location. So I feel like I could get used to the food in London. I could get used to the weather. I could get used to the company.
You could get used to the weather?
Oh yeah.
You're superhuman.
But it's just the loneliness that came with not having someone to speak Cantonese with or having to explain certain jokes or the way that I say things or conceptualize things because of the way Cantonese shaped the way I think. It reminded me time and again that I'm an outsider, that I'm away from home, and there's a part of me that craves connection. And I feel like if this is what it feels like to be away from home, then yes, I feel like losing my mother tongue or not getting to use it as much as I wanted is way more devastating than not being with my family for Mid-Autumn Festival.
Yes, and that language is intimately linked to that physical presence, like you said, isn't it? You need that friend or that person who shares this experience of growing up with the language that you don't need to explain the jokes to because then they're not funny anymore if you have to explain them.
Yeah.
So that's irreplaceable for sure. And then the narrator implies that shared language and culture might actually matter more than love itself. So do you think that belonging to a place, Hong Kong or anywhere else, can transcend love for an individual?
I guess it's a really, really difficult question to answer because I feel like every person would have a different sort of weight for each thing and even a different response when it comes to a different person on the scale, or when they're faced with this choice in a different period of time in their lives, I feel like love for an individual is extremely strong. And it's one of the reasons why people actually emigrate. Like they would get married and move with their spouses to somewhere else because they decided that life together in the same nation is more important than staying home. But then there's also people who are not willing to give up on their belonging to a place. They decided to stay there and give up all of the other great opportunities. So far, like I feel like the people I see in my immediate circles, most of them would choose love over their hometowns. Like I see a lot more people getting married and leaving Hong Kong instead of staying in Hong Kong because the other half won't leave. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes love still wins.
Love still wins sometimes, all is not lost. It'd be interesting to know, actually, sorry, this is not in our prepared questions, but since you've mentioned you know a lot of people who are leaving Hong Kong, maybe following a partner for love, I'm wondering about the other way around. If I might add a question here, but do you know of any people or of a trend where the opposite happens? So maybe, I don't know if any of your local acquaintances might meet someone from somewhere else and that person might move over here, or any Hong Kongers who've moved away moving back, maybe? Is that anything you've experienced?
I think that's definitely possible. I mean, my own mother is actually a sort of overseas bride. Like she was born in mainland China. She's actually ethnic minority. So when she met my father and got married, that she made the choice to move to Hong Kong. She did speak Cantonese, but in a lot of ways, the city life is different from her life in the villages of rural China. And she had a lot to learn about even how to dress, how to walk in the streets, and how to respond when a policeman asks for your papers. So I feel like I am sort of a child of an overseas bride. So I see that sort of migration into Hong Kong because of love. And I do see people moving back to Hong Kong, perhaps. It's not always like the grass is greener on the other side. There's a lot of stories about people moving overseas and feeling like, oh, I cannot fit in here. There's something in Hong Kong that I still want to stay for. And they will come back. And I feel like this is what's so dynamic about human relationships and migrations. Like they could change their minds. And I really do look forward to seeing what happens with everything else. But glad to say that my mother is a very happy overseas bride.
It turned out really well for her then.
Yeah.
Good to know. So you have talked a bit about the dissonance of switching between Cantonese and English. And in your essay, you likened it to changing how you breathe when you're reading in English like you did just now, or speaking in English. Can you elaborate a bit on this analogy and how it shapes your writing?
So I'm very glad that I get to learn how to speak English from a very young age. Of course, I'm not perfect, but I feel comfortable enough to make jokes, to argue with people, to tell people off when they say something really rude. And of course, I grew up with Cantonese. So I've been becoming more aware that speaking these two languages would bring out different parts of me. So sometimes my friends would say that I sound really serious when I speak Cantonese because that's the language I teach in. That's the language I conduct a lot of serious business in. And when I speak English, I usually do it with friends, with acquaintances I meet in the literary circle. We get to make jokes that are referencing popular culture outside of Cantonese. So the sense of humor is quite different. And we get to talk about topics that perhaps are difficult to talk about in Cantonese because the language is not quite as available. So, for example, I pay a lot of attention to gender issues. And in English, of course, we now know what the word incel means. It means like a person who is involuntarily celibate. They cannot find a girlfriend. But this word doesn't have an easily available or easily understandable Cantonese translation. So when I try to explain this concept to my friends in Cantonese, I find myself going through a translation process and a lot of explanation. And it could get tedious sometimes. But I know that if I speak to a friend in English, they would immediately know that because the English-speaking world is already caught up on this vocabulary. So when I try to write in Cantonese, I have to always bear in mind that perhaps I have the sensibility or the knowledge of certain issues that are already quite well discussed in the English-speaking world. Perhaps I need to slow down a little bit when I write it in Cantonese and give more explanations. And remember that sometimes the Cantonese-speaking community has a different acceptance for certain concepts or jokes. And to try to change the way I reveal certain ideas. So it's quite different, but I feel like both windows are accessible to a very genuine part of me. It's just perhaps the glass is sort of different colored, so light comes through in a different way.
I have to agree with the idea that we change personalities a bit when we speak different languages. I've been told that I'm nicer when I speak English.
Really?
Well, I speak French, so consider yourself lucky that we are not doing this in my mother tongue. Because apparently I wouldn't be that nice, according to someone who told me that 8 years ago or something, and I still remember.
Oh, dear.
She was a very nice person, by the way, so I think she didn't mean anything bad by it. So you talked about writing... you talked about the dissonance just now of speaking different languages and switching between the two. But if we go more specifically into writing, in the essay that accompanied your short story on cha, you talked about the gap between standard written Chinese and colloquial Cantonese. So just to give a bit of context to any English-speaking listeners who might not realize, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like spoken Cantonese is quite different from standard written Chinese, which also in Hong Kong uses traditional characters. That's a whole other dimension. And so does that mean that you need to change the way that you write? So how does this tension between those differences influence your creative choices? And what effect do you hope to achieve by weaving written Cantonese, so all these expressions you talked about with pig and everything, into literary texts?
This is a really good question because Overseas Bride opened up a lot of conversations about this. So for standard written Chinese, it's a very stable sort of system of writing that speakers of Cantonese and Mandarin would use when they want to write something. But when we speak Cantonese, the grammar and vocabulary we use is quite different from whatever we write down. We can obviously transcribe everything we say in Cantonese using Chinese characters, but it would have a very different texture compared to standard written Chinese. And if you are a student in Hong Kong studying Chinese, your teacher will actually take points out of your essay if you wrote anything that is Cantonese in your work. You're expected to use exclusively standard written Chinese. And when you are someone who is working with a literary creation, you would obviously want to use whatever material that is available to you, be it Cantonese or Mandarin or standard written Chinese or even English or French or Japanese or whatever it is, because art doesn't have these rules. So for me, growing up as a writer who started very, very young, I started as a teenager in school, I had to sort of learn that it's actually okay to use Cantonese in my work. And I have noticed that in recent years, I'm less and less shying away from putting Cantonese in my stories. Sometimes readers would complain, or some older fashioned people would feel like this is a sign of bad grammar or that you don't have a good grasp on the written language, that you have to resort to using Cantonese. But I feel like as a very genuine person from Hong Kong who speaks the language of Cantonese and learns writing through reading books from Taiwan, from China, from Hong Kong, from everywhere, Cantonese is an invaluable material and has a specific texture to the language that I really want to tap into in my own work. So I know that I'm making the conscious decision to weave in Cantonese when I choose to, because it achieves a certain artistic effect. I wouldn't do it just because it sounds more cool or sounds like I'm breaking certain rules. But sometimes there are specific things that just cannot be achieved using standard written Chinese, and that's how I decide to do it. There are other projects that I would exclusively use standard written Chinese because I was commissioned to do that, or I felt like that is something that I really wanted to do. For example, for the opera Women Like Us, it was sung in Cantonese, but the composer Daniel and I decided that we should do it in standard written Chinese to give it a more literary feel and to make it sound less like the language we use in everyday life, which is exactly what the operatic experience is supposed to be. It's supposed to be dreamy, it's supposed to be detached from everyday life. So that's the texture we chose. But for my own writing, if I have full creative freedom, I am just starting to embrace using Cantonese more and more if it fits the story.
And clearly it fits this story very well, which is about language, obviously, and mother tongue. So I really enjoy that. And I think even a reader like myself who's reading the translation in English can sense the richness here of Cantonese and the spoken Cantonese that you chose to incorporate. Let's talk a bit about Hong Kong's cultural paradoxes. There are many of them, but I'd like to refer to the cultural desert that you mentioned in the story. This is something that I've heard a lot as well. In fact, I say that in my podcast intro. What we're trying to do here, talking about Hong Kong writers, is actually coming to destroy a bit of this idea that Hong Kong is a cultural desert. It's pretty annoying when people say that. So I want to ask you, when the narrator calls Hong Kong a cultural desert, but then still lists its vibrant art scene and the book fair and all sorts of things, is this a critique of external perceptions or an internal contradiction that Hong Kongers themselves grapple with and talk about?
I think it's actually both. So when I made the protagonists list all these amazing things that people are doing in the art scene in Hong Kong, it's sort of like a rebuttal to whoever is calling Hong Kong a cultural desert. I feel like the notion of Hong Kong being a cultural desert is very dated and also very inaccurate. If you cannot find it, that means you're probably not looking hard enough. And I feel like there's a sentiment of looking down upon Hong Kong as a place that could possibly be creative or artistic. Perhaps it has its own historical reasons for why this saying arose, but I feel like as a person who is actively looking for interesting things and celebrating artists and authors, there's just so much happening in the city that deserves our attention and our celebration. So I feel like this is one of the moments when I really want to tell people, hey, please stop saying that and just look and try to find all these amazing things that we're doing. I hope that it gives a bit more hope to people, knowing that there are still writers in Hong Kong actively publishing and writing in so many different languages, and to just retire the idea that we were, or at any point, a cultural desert.
I read it I read it a little bit as colonial stance actually on Hong Kong. I know that when you spoke in that panel during the Hong Kong International Literary Festival a few weeks ago, where you spoke with Benny Chia from the founder of the Fringe Club, he talked a little bit about his experience back when he was starting the Fringe Club, and that back then all the concerts and sort of live happenings in the music field were all Western artists and all Western musicians, and that was how it was supposed to be at the Hong Kong Arts Centre. And that he was told that basically people wouldn't really be interested in listening to maybe local artists, or that there was no place for them. And that's how the whole Fringe Festival started, isn't it? That's when I hear that phrase, cultural desert, I do think it comes from there. It's a little bit of this idea that, oh, Hong Kong is this financial hub and, that's all. Like, people are there to work and make loads of money and there's nothing else. Is that far-fetched, or do you think could come from there a bit
I
as
think
well?
that could be a factor in why people like to think of Hong Kong as not having culture. But I feel like from my perspective, actually literature in Chinese actually proves that Hong Kong was the place for arts and culture to happen. So in uh, the Chinese writing community, we all know the word 南來作家. So it literally means the writers who came down south. So it refers to this group of writers from mainland China who, for whatever reason, decided to move to Hong Kong so that they could continue to write. Like Hong Kong was the place to give these writers a home, to give them a place to publish. And some of them are actually extremely famous and influential in the Chinese writing community, even to this day. And these writers came in waves. They didn't just come once. Like they came over the years, over the decades. And even just looking at this Chinese language literature aspect, there's so much evidence that this is the place to be if you wanted to be creative. So I feel like, of course, there is that colonial aspect of perhaps looking at performing arts and saying, oh, maybe Chinese people are just not interested or people are not interested in Chinese artists. But at least from the literature point of view, I definitely see that Hong Kong was historically the place to be.
Oh, I'm so glad that it still is.
Yeah.
Thanks to your work and that of other writers, thankfully, who are proving otherwise. So let's talk a little bit about the soundscape and the lived experience. So just like we are now in a pretty crowded and loud environment in the Eaton Hotel in the middle of Kowloon in Jordan, the story revels in Hong Kong's cacophonous soundscape, such as taxi drivers, tangs, and many more. So is this a reflection of your own experience, and how does noise define the city's cultural texture?
Oh, wow. I would definitely have to say that Hong Kong is extremely noisy compared to the other places that I visit. So I feel like Hong Kong is the only place in the world where I have to sleep with earplugs in. I mean, I've lived in London for a bit. I've spent 3 months in Iowa, which, well, it's not necessarily a fair comparison because they're not a huge crowded city like Hong Kong. But I feel like every time I come back from an extended period overseas, the first thing that hits me in the airport, if not all the scam calls that suddenly come into my phone, is this assault of sounds. Like everything makes a noise. Like the escalator would make a noise, the shops would inexplicably make noise, the people would speak really loudly. Something would be beeping, and then you can hear the traffic outside. You could hear the planes above you. There are a lot of different tracks of sounds going on all the time in Hong Kong, and it always strikes me the moment I step into the airport. And I feel like this is something that we are very used to in Hong Kong, and we can actively actually screen it out because we have to. If we don't do that, we won't be able to keep going. So I feel like noise is a very interesting way for us to understand the city. There are certain noises that you can only hear in Hong Kong, like the weird clicking noise you hear when you try to cross the road. That is something that is so special. Or the specific sound you hear when a taxi tries to stop, or when you go into an MTR. There are these announcements that you can possibly memorize and repeat if you're a little child who likes to do that. And all these, I feel like, shape our identity of a city that is very fast-paced, very crowded. We don't have time for you to read a sign with your eyes. We have to scream at you by a recorded announcement or a warning beep. And I actually quite like that. And hanging out with musicians, I have came to learn that every sound can be part of music. And I'm starting to embrace that, but still keeping my earplugs in when I go to bed.
They're instantly recognizable, those sounds of Hong Kong, I feel like. So I just want to ask you one last question about your, if you had faced any encouragement or more pressure to write in English, which I think fits really well with everything we've talked about. How does that intersect with your own identity as a Cantonese speaking writer? I think you do write in English as well. So or at least maybe some more critical texts that you write, like the essay that you wrote about Overseas Bride. So have you faced any sort of pressure from anywhere or anyone to write more in English?
Wow, actually, a lot of people have been encouraging me to write more in English. They could be local writer friends who say, hey, I actually really admire that you speak English at this level. Perhaps writing in English could be an interesting avenue because, as you know, literary translation of Hong Kong writers' works are not always easy. We don't have literary agents in Hong Kong, and it could be very difficult for us to get a translator or a publisher of our works to be translated into English or other languages. So if I were to start writing in English, then that would eliminate a lot of the middle steps of getting my work to be read by a wider audience out there. And sometimes when I was in Iowa speaking to writers from other places who speak other languages, we always have this feeling of, hey, perhaps writing in English could be something that we can try out now that we've lived in America for a little bit and could see that we could actually communicate in English. But then there's also this sense of insecurity because English is not our native languages, and we would have so many other people who speak it as a native language to compete against. But then we would always get really good advice from Chris Merrill, the director of the International Writing Program, saying that not speaking English as your mother tongue would actually make you a better writer because you can break all these rules and then your language would be unique to you, not like anybody else's. So I feel like I might actually go into trying to write more creatively in English. I definitely do not have the decades of training in creative writing as I do with using Chinese and Cantonese, but I'm willing to embark on that journey. I do have editors coming to ask if I would be interested in doing that, so that's very encouraging. And I feel like it could be an extension to who I am as a person, not just someone that speaks Cantonese or primarily writes in Chinese, but also finding a different way of expressing myself to let the other side of me come out and say, hey, this could also be an interesting story. Perhaps people who could not read Cantonese or Chinese would be able to come into my world and look at my creative vision through English. So that is something that I'm looking forward to experimenting, and hopefully something interesting would come out of it.
Well, I'm sure it will, and us readers will be there waiting for sure. So final question, because I really want to squeeze this in. The final plea, the story ends with keep on speaking. Is this a fear of cultural erasure, personal longing for connection, or both?
I would definitely say it's both. So the personal level of wanting to keep speaking is definitely a yearning for connection, especially since the story was written during COVID. That was definitely humanity's most lonesome era so far. And also, I feel like I've always been trying to encourage and uplift fellow Hong Kong authors because I feel like we definitely need more people to come out and tell their stories. We need more people to talk about Hong Kong, to use the language of Cantonese, to keep it alive, so that we will have something to hold on to, no matter how the world changes. I'm by nature a very anxious person. I'm always afraid that things I love or take for granted would disappear overnight. And writing is my way of sort of combating that. I know that if I committed it to paper and writing, it would stay there forever. And I feel like my love for Hong Kong now manifests in a way where I want people to keep talking about this place. I want people to keep writing about it, keep reading about it, keep creating anything you want about this place so that it stays alive. So I wanted the protagonist in the story Overseas Bride to keep on saying, hey, please keep speaking. Whatever it is, just keep talking, keep making noise, stay alive.
What a wonderful call to action to end our interview. Thank you so much, Eva. This has been wonderful, so interesting. I feel like we could keep going on and on, but we do need to wrap up now. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Local Lingo, Today we're looking at 食字, literally eating words, but meaning to play with words or make puns. We saw this in Overseas Bride, where familiar sayings get remixed to reflect the characters' experiences of migration.
Yes, and I couldn't help but notice that there were many phrases referencing Ju or the pig.
Any more examples of such phrases you could share?
Yeah, sure. Do you know 扮豬食老虎?
I don't think so.
Literally, to pretend to be a pig eating a tiger, meaning play dumb to take advantage of someone.
扮豬食老虎.
That's right.
Hey, then do you realize there's a common theme across all three local lingo phrases so far?
I think I might know what you mean. Is it...
Wait, let's challenge our audience to identify this theme. Find the link to Hong Kong Lit Club on Instagram in the description of this episode and let us know your answer in the comments.
Great, I'm looking forward to it.
See you next time. This was your monthly dose of words from the fragrant harbour, brought to you by the writers of Hong Kong, past and present. Have a great month of reading, and until next time on Hong Kong Lit Club, 下次見.